Christian Petracca potentially leaving Melbourne at the end of the year has now become a possibility, with a report from Tom Morris stating that he is apparently disillusioned with Melbourne, and if he was a free agent, he would be open to a trade and leaving Melbourne by the end of the year. Welcome back to the Premiership Quarter. Today, this video is going to be all about Christian Petracca, talking a little bit about this situation and where I think it might end up at the end of the year, as it's a pretty big talking point with one of the biggest players in the entire league potentially leaving his club with 5 years to go on a deal as well. But with that being said, if you wouldn't mind leaving a like on the video as well as subscribing to my channel if you do like this type of content, it really helps grow it and I'd really appreciate it. But with that being said, let's get straight into the video.
It came up behind him like a librarian. Jesus!
So I actually first heard the report when I was at gym, and I got it was from a post on Instagram from Footy on 9, and they have links with Tom Morris, and I was very, very intrigued because it wasn't completely out of the blue, to be honest, for me, because I think there is a fair bit going on with Melbourne. Obviously, a lot of people know that you've got the Oliver situation and the Joel Smith situation last year. There's been a lot happening at the Melbourne Football Club, and a lot of that can rub off on some players, and it seems to have done that to Christian Petracca. And I think it's going to create a very, very interesting situation. And I'll read out what Tom Morris has actually said. And what he said is that Christian Petracca is disillusioned with the club. So his goals and what he wants the club to do probably isn't aligned with their front office, and they probably don't have the same idea of what they want to happen this year. Maybe Melbourne are looking to trade a couple pieces away. Maybe Clayton Oliver, who Petracca, I dare say, would be very good friends with, something along those lines where they just don't see eye to eye. And he said, and Tom Morris has said that he would be open to a trade if he were a free agent this year, which is a very big thing to say, because that means he's not just disinterested and disillusioned, he would genuinely want to leave, because if an offer comes up, he wants to be somewhere else. That shows that maybe this chemistry and the Melbourne locker room banter, I guess, isn't as good as they say. And Max Gawn specifically has said that it's a fantastic locker room, but maybe it's not, and that could very well be the reason Christian Petracca, or at least one of the reasons he wants to leave. He is contracted until 2029 and would be on a lot of money, probably close to $1 million and a half a year, and it could very well be back-ended with a fair bit of pay rise, as that's what a lot of contracts are, especially when they're long-term. Still got the spleen injury, so won't play the rest of the year. But he said he's disgruntled and particularly disillusioned with the club's direction. So it's a very difficult situation for Melbourne to go through, because at the moment they're not making finals this year. Ever since 2021, they have gotten worse progressively. They obviously had 2 straight years where they got eliminated in straight sets in the finals, and that doesn't help boost morale at all from players. It's very disappointing, and now this year they've taken another step back and aren't going to make finals as well. And so they've dealt with some injuries this year, but they haven't been able to push through. And there's certainly a lot of stuff going on that we can see now at the club. What this could mean is that by the end of this season, both Christian Petracca and Clayton Oliver, the 2 best players in the 2021 season for Melbourne, outside of obviously the great Max Gawn, could both theoretically not be at the club at the end of the season, and both who are on long-term contracts. And that spells potentially a genuine 5-year long minimum rebuild for Melbourne, because there have been also reports of Jack Viney potentially leaving, heard him potentially to North Melbourne. We've obviously seen some Harrison Petty trade talks, although I think he potentially is signing a 2-year deal, which I just don't get. I don't know why Melbourne continue to pursue with him. It's just a very weird choice for them to do that. But it could show that there's signs of, obviously, Petracca wanting to potentially have another year, as I mentioned, and the Melbourne Demons thinking that with the introduction of Tasmania, if they try go for an extra year or an extra 2 years challenging with this list, which I think they can because the core is still fantastic, it might mean that they go into a rebuild and have 3 years where they get some good draft picks before battling with Richmond probably at the bottom, and then they just don't necessarily match up with Tasmania getting enough draft picks in to genuinely rebuild. Because it's either you keep everyone for 1 or 2 years and have a last go similar to the last dance, what we've seen with Geelong a few times, or you cull the list and you don't do a North Melbourne per se, but you capitalise and sort of do what Richmond might do at the end of the year and just get as many assets as you can for your prized possessions. Petrarca at this stage could genuinely command 2 to 3 first round picks. If Tim Kelly got that and Jeremy Cameron got that, then I think Christian Petracca is also in that ballpark. Clayton Oliver still hasn't had a good year, probably a good 18 months to be fair, but we still know how good of a player he is, and Adelaide would have to give up a fair bit to get him, and they've got a first round pick. Jack Viney as well could probably get him a second at this later age and the latter part of his career. Could you potentially do the Harrison Petty trade to Adelaide as well? There's a lot still there. Stephen May, Jake Lever as well. There's a lot of pieces, but it's just sort of surrounded by a fair bit of youth and very young youth. There's not a lot of genuine prime players outside of potentially Trent Rivers and Christian Salem. Outside of the people who have been linked to go away, they're all on the outer. And this could change the market, to be honest, because at the end of the season, there's going to be a lot of movement if these two teams in Richmond and Melbourne decide to genuinely get get rid of everyone, cull the list, and get as many pieces and as much value as they can out of them now before they sort of take a bit of a dip later. What Melbourne could potentially get for Christian Petrarca is obviously a big demanding price, but it also depends on where he would go. I think more than likely he would want to stay in Victoria. There's no reason for him not to. But if you want to look at the teams, obviously you got St Kilda who have the salary cap too, and they'd want to get a player like him, considering I also missed out on him when he was drafted, because they picked, I think it was Paddy McCartan at the time. They could potentially look at North Melbourne as well, who have a lot of young pieces, but probably don't fit him in necessarily, given they've got LDU and Cheezel, who are more forward type midfielders as well. If you look at teams like Richmond, they won't do what Hawthorn I could potentially see, but I don't know what they would give up. Maybe it would include a Josh Ward potentially for Melbourne to get back in return. Collingwood, obviously, there's always going to be the Lynx and Geelong as well. Geelong, I would say, is a great fit, but there's nothing to really give up to get for him. Collingwood as well, not much to give up. They traded their first round picks, and I don't see enough youth for them to be able to get the deal done. The Bulldogs, obviously, too much talent already in the midfield. They probably want to look elsewhere. Outside of that, there's obviously Richmond won't do it. Carlton, again, probably don't have the pieces to be able to get a trade done. And then you're looking at Essendon, and I could potentially see him go to Essendon and form a really good duo with him and Zach Merritt. But I'm not sure if that's the environment he would want to go to. I don't think he would want that situation, given that Essendon haven't been anywhere near as good as Melbourne in the same time span since 2021. So to me, in Melbourne, St Kilda and Geelong are probably the two teams that would suit him best. It's just also considering what he would demand in terms of value. I think if Josh Battle leaves, St Kilda have potentially pick 5 and pick 6. That is a great basis for them to potentially use to lure Christian Petrarca. And as a base, it works. You can potentially add a young piece in there, maybe an older piece like a Brad Crouch or something to get them as a more senior piece. Just as a midfield as well to immediately replace, opens up the number 5 spot as well, which is very, very nice. But if you're to look outside of Victoria, look at the Sydney teams. I don't think Sydney would want them. Obviously, they've already got a completely stacked midfield. I could see GWS trying to lure him in because I think he would complement Green and Cornelio and Kelly and Callahan really, really nicely as a bit more of a forward midfielder. But I don't know who they would trade for him. I think they've got a couple picks that they could throw in, but they might have to include someone like Callahan to get it done. Then you look at the Queensland teams, Gold Coast, they would want him, but they have been linked to a fair few others as well. and I don't think they have the pieces after that. Then Brisbane, also their midfield doesn't fit him in. Look at the Adelaide teams. Port Adelaide, great midfield already. And then Adelaide, they're looking probably at someone like Clayton Oliver, given you've got Rankin and Rochelle already as those forward midfielders. Then you look to Perth. I think Fremantle could potentially use him in there as a Fife replacement, but they've got a war chest and they're probably going to look elsewhere, maybe as like a potential key forward, if unless they want to trade someone else. Maybe they actually Fremantle could work now that I'm thinking about it. If they want to use their picks, because Logan McDonald looks to have stayed and they found their forwards in Tracy and Misson Jackson, maybe Fremantle work as well, given they've got some, I think, 3 first-round picks, so they're another one. And then West Coast are probably a bit too far away for Petracca, given he probably wants to contend. And so Melbourne at this moment are probably getting 3 first-round picks in return. That sets them up if they do want to go for a rebuild in spectacular fashion. You get a first and a second potentially for Clayton Oliver if he goes to Adelaide, where they've got their first-round pick at about pick 5, and they've shown that they aren't fantastic at development. Probably want to win now, get as much out of Tex as possible. Maybe they use that pick in like a future second or third. You get 4 first-round picks, a second, then you get Viney, another second, and then you've got a really good basis this year. And if you can get a couple of other pieces traded out, maybe like a Tom McDonald, Christian Salem, if you want to capitalize on his value, and then rebuild around Pickett, Van Rooyen. You've got Matt Jefferson in the back line, in the twos playing as a forward. You've got Trent Rivers, Judd McVee, Tholstrup and Windsor as well. You've got a really solid core that you can then build around for the future. Just find some key defensive pieces and you could be set. I think also Harrison Petty, but I'm just not a huge fan of him. He'd probably play defense in my opinion. I think there's a basis for them to do it, and that's probably where the big challenge comes for Melbourne. Do they want to reset, or do they want to push for this last 1 or 2 years? It's obviously going to be a very difficult question for them to answer, and I think that how they perform in the next couple of weeks could determine where they think they're at. Do they want to potentially play a couple of younger pieces? Max Gordon has already come out and said that pride for them is a big thing and that they don't want to rest some players. He said he won't rest them. He won't be rested, sorry. And so that sort of seems to me that they want to go again. They want to try another run at the premiership, but I just don't think with Simon Goodwin as the coach that they're going to be able to do it. I think the game's gone a little bit past how they want to play, and we've seen that with a couple of their players getting older. They're not as defensively solid, which is what they back their game on, and their midfielders aren't as contestedly fantastic as they were, which again they pride themselves on. It just, their system doesn't work as well. And so for me, see if you can capitalize on it. Richmond have done it, or are going to do it, and I think it could be really important for them to make this decision. Because it can actually set them up for the future very nicely. And I do see them having a good future if they do choose that decision now. But that's going to be the end of this video. I think it's a big change for the AFL if they do decide to trade Christian Petracca, because everything changes. Genuinely, so much would change if he goes to a St Kilda and helps push them into possibly top 4 contention after a bounce back season similar to Fremantle. So that's going to be the end of this video. Really appreciate you guys sticking around. This was just a long video for just the one topic. If you do like the video, please hit the like button. Really help push this video in the YouTube algorithm. Leave your thoughts as well in the comments below about this situation, as I think it can impact a lot of what happens in the off-season for the AFL. And then also subscribe to my channel if you do like this type of content. It really helps grow my channel. But thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.